I'm Jill Rowe, and in this episode I speak to David Bailey about the life-changing thing I learnt from a massage. Together we discuss how we can make well-being a part of the everyday rather than a mountain that we have to climb, and how perhaps sometimes we need to make the call to prioritise our well-being rather than putting it on the line. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Well, it's nice to see you, David.
Thanks, Jill. It's good to see you too.
This is the first podcast we've done together. Normally you are Steve.
Yes, but I'm not today.
Not today.
No.
Not today.
No. So it's good to be with you.
Very nice to be with you. And we're going to talk about well-being today, aren't we?
Looking forward to it.
I thought we'd begin with me telling a story about a trip to a massage person. What do you call a massage person?
Masseur.
A masseur? Masseuse?
Masseuse?
Anyway, it was in a hotel. And it was in one of those spa placey things. And I thought, I'll just have a nice treat. So I'll have a massage. So I went and had a massage. And massages are weird, aren't they? Because they're like, ugh.
Yeah,
how do you feel about it? You don't like it?
I don't. I'll tell them my story.
Okay, we won't talk about it for long. But this really strange thing happened as a result of this massage, which was I sometimes go running / jogging. Not a lot, but I'd try and go occasionally. And at the end of this massage, the person who'd been doing the massage said to me, "Do you go running?" And I was like, how do you even know? Like, I don't have a tattoo that says I go running, so how did she know? Anyway, what she said to me was that she could tell by the way that my legs moved out the front of me that there was a slight turn in one of my legs, and she could tell that I would run with a slight limp. I don't mean a big limp, but a slight limp. And I had absolutely no idea. And she said to me, she asked me, do you ever get an ache? Do you ever feel like your back hurts on one side? Do you ever? And she could tell me all these things about me that I had no way of understanding. And suddenly she was going, oh, well, it's because of this. And I was thinking when that happened, how interesting it is that sometimes who we are as human beings, there's stuff about us that others can see, and we need them to help us work out how to be better, well, more whole, more... Because I was completely oblivious to it. Yeah. And it was a physical thing for me. Yeah. And it made me think a lot about well-being.
Sure.
So I'm busy, you're busy, lots of people are busy in their lives, aren't they? But you get into the swing of everything and things are happening fast, and you kind of don't think about how you are until someone says, do you realise that, you've got a headache? It may be because... Have you ever, do you want to share your trauma of a massage story?
I will, but it's I was not in a well-being place in my massage. We were at a spa place, Caroline and I. Caroline loves treatments.
Caroline's your wife.
My wife. She just loves treatments, and I don't like them at all. But anyway, I went for this massage, and I just found it incredibly uncomfortable because there was dolphin music playing and then there was like chopsticks, or not chopsticks, what are those things? Infusers.
Oh yeah.
The sticks in a pot.
They could have been chopsticks.
Yeah, they could have been. Anyway, there was nice smell. And then this woman just was touching me, and I just found it really uncomfortable because it was kind of intimate but weird, and I didn't like it at all.
So you've never been back?
No, that was my one and only massage. So I'd rather go walking or throw myself in the sea or do anything apart from massage. So it was not good for my well-being.
Well, I'm really sorry to have brought up this dark...
Yeah, well, I think I might need counselling. but I think you're right in terms of the fact that actually it's often others who see things in us that we don't see ourselves. And that also that sense of when we're really busy, we notice things less about ourselves. So I think maybe at the heart of well-being, and maybe we can explore this, is that sense of slowing down. So we begin to notice things, not only about ourselves, but about others, about the world around us, about the conversations, about the moments that are in front of us. Because I think in those moments, that's when we can kind of feel alive, and it's so easy to miss those really kind of precious precious
So
times.
how do you do that? How do you slow down?
I quite like to be active, but I also I like walking, and I will just walk anywhere. It doesn't have to be pretty or beautiful, but actually it's in the process of walking and that very thing about kind of putting one foot in front of the other, that actual process of kind of the rhythm of walking. And I try and take notice of what's around me.
So there's an intentionality, isn't there,
exactly.
about our well-being?
Yes.
It's not something that too often we leave it to chance.
Yes.
But actually there's something about being intentional. But there's also something about the richness and breadth and depth of life in that intention.
Yeah, exactly.
That we often miss if we aren't intentional about it. So... you see things, you notice things.
Yeah.
So you walk.
Yeah.
What about when you're in the middle of a meeting or so? Like, how do you consider your...
I think I pay attention to my breathing, I think, and actually pay attention... Again, I think it's about being present. So in a meeting, it's really easy to get distracted and go on look at your emails or something. But then you're trying to do two things at once, and that's not very helpful. So actually... and I find it much less stressful if I actually just do one thing at a time and try and do that thing well. So if that's either you and I having a conversation, then I try and be completely present rather than kind of looking at my phone. And if it's in a meeting, then actually to be present in that meeting, contributing. And I just find that because, speaking personally, I just find that actually there's a question of integrity there as well, isn't there? If you're present in that meeting, then actually you're giving your best to that moment.
And that works so if you're a busy mum or a busy dad, that's true in that experience as well, isn't it? I'm thinking of a particular young mum I know where she is so present to her children, and there's something divine. There is something stunning and beautiful about the very fact that she is so present and doesn't allow the other things to cut in on that. But actually life, I'm thinking in work, you feel like you've got to be doing a million things to be seen as successful. Or I've got to be busy, like busy is my stripes that I wear on my arm. Or actually that almost dehumanises us.
I think it does. And I think those moments, I remember walking my daughter to school when she was Lydia. She was about 8, I think, and we were walking to school. We were a little late, so we were kind of walking quickly, and then she stopped me. And it was a beautiful sunny morning, and there was, I think it was kind of like October time, and the cobwebs were out, and the dew was all over the cobwebs. And she stopped me and she said, Dad, look at this. And I was like, no, we're late, come on, we've got to go. And then she, no, you've got to look at this, Dad, it's beautiful. And she stopped me, and I turned around, and I'd missed it because she was much smaller than me, and I'd missed it. And so I crouched down. And then I thought, well, actually, it doesn't really matter if we're late. We're just going to have a look at this cobweb together. And it was a really kind of you spoke a moment ago about those kind of divine moments. And there's just a kind of moment of connection, really, between myself and Lydia, and then the creation right there in amongst the kind of busyness of life. And it was just by pausing and just slowing down and being kind of present. And I suppose that reminds us that we are human, actually, and that we have a connection to creation. Then actually that can get lost in the kind of work, kind of capitalist kind of arc, the busyness where we just feel like cogs in a machine. And actually it's reminding ourselves that we are connected much more to creation than we realise.
So I'm thinking of a couple of things at the moment. I can't remember who the author was, but the book is called Essentialism, and it's really about how do you simplifying every undoing the knottiness.
Yes,
because the knottiness creates the chaos, and not that all chaos is bad, because it's a very creative thing, but the complexity and simplifying that, and then also this shift towards that very minimalist carrying less possessions, all of that kind of thing I think is all about this desire. We have to rediscover what it means to be healthy human being here on this beautiful planet, etc. Which, like you just say, that arc of capitalism is like is the opposite of that, isn't it? It's what can I have? How much of it can I get?
How much can I consume?
How much can I consume? So there's this real challenge here, and there's that moment in, I can't even think which one of the Gospels in the Bible it talks about it, but where that rich young ruler approaches Jesus and says, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" And people have often interpreted that in that, it's about the afterlife, but the thought around what eternal was how do I live a good life right here, right now, in this present reality? How do I experience the divine in the midst of the ordinariness of the everyday? How do I find that depth and breadth here and now? It's just a really fascinating thing to ask.
So how do we kind of glimpse the kind of divine, or how do we find those moments in the mundaneness of life? And I think it's something we learn, really. So the other day we were in North Cornwall and we were walking up on a cliff path, and I was with my son Dan, who's 19, and I said to Dan, "Look at that! It's beautiful, isn't it?" He goes, it's all right. It's like this amazing view, like looking west and looking east along the North Cornish coast. It was absolutely stunning. The sun was setting. It was quite breezy. There was, the sea was kind of rough, and it just looked beautiful. I said, it looks great, doesn't it, Dan? Well, it looks all right. I can look at it on Google. I said, you could look at it on Google, but you wouldn't experience it as well. I'd experience the wind if I put a fan on my desk and looked at it on Google.
It's a creative boy.
It's a creative way of doing it, but it's not the same as being present in that environment and being kind of connected to the earth in that moment.
A friend of mine who goes on a retreat every year, and one of the things he does is he takes his shoes off for the whole of the retreat, which sounds really freaky. But he does it because he wants to feel that, like, his connectedness. So he's connected to God, to the creation, and to others. But he walks the earth barefoot. Which is really fascinating. It's a kind of very native people's thing to do, isn't it? That reconnecting with what we become distant from. And find a healthy wholeness in that space. I love it when you're on a plane, and it's not a great moment because they're going to tell you what's going to happen if you crash. But there's that moment on the plane at the beginning, isn't there, where they're going through all the, here's what you do with your jacket and blah, 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 and blow into this, and a light will come on when you land in the water. And then one of the things they say is if the oxygen levels drop, an oxygen mask will fall from above your head, and what you must do is put that on your own face first and then deal with others around you. And I always think that that's the thing that we don't understand, that we can preoccupy our lives with making sure everyone else is okay, but we forget our own need for air, our own need for oxygen, our own need to tend to who we are and tend to ourselves. So what does that then look like? I guess we need to make some brave decisions in our lives
about space and about slowing down and about and I think there's not about being lazy. This is about being intentional, like you said earlier. And I think your massage story about how about how the monsieur, is that what's the
person
word?
doing the massage?
That's
let's
it.
go
Thanks.
with that.
Let's roll with that. Pointed out that there was something wrong. So actually, there's a humanness in the connection between us that gives shape to us. So even though the oxygen mask thing is really important, because we have to look after ourselves, because that's our responsibility, but also we need others to point out, and we need others to shape us to become who we are.
So what do you think are the different dimensions of well-being? Because there's like the physical. We've talked quite a lot about the physical, and probably that's the easiest one to do stuff about.
Yeah.
Well, we know what kind of stuff we should be doing.
Yeah, even if we're not very good at it.
Go and do it. But what would you say are the other dimensions of?
I suppose if you look at it like a kind of square, so you'd have physical, you'd have emotional, you'd have financial, and then you'd have social. And you and I know we were chatting the other day, weren't we? And often the kind of spiritual stuff gets filed under a small bullet point under social. But actually, the spiritual runs through a thread through all of those. You can't separate it out. You know, how you use your money is a spiritual discipline. What you do with your money, the things you choose to buy and the things you choose not to buy. How you spend your money, you know. So I'm in the process of trying to educate my children about where to try and buy their clothes. You know, this is a challenge, you know, because of the ethical kind of dimensions to that. So, and then our emotional sense is intimately connected to our spiritual sense. You know, I think we're very much spiritual beings, however we kind of begin to express that, actually.
So one of this is just a really practical thing that I sometimes do with those dimensions is it get people to draw them as axes. So, you know, it basically looks like a wheel without the spokes of a wheel without the edge on.
So do you do 4 or do you do 5?
I do 5 because I think it's really important to take the spiritual out of being just a subset and helping people understand that it's a part of who we are that I think we have lost at our peril. So when I think about spiritual well-being, I'm thinking, you know, our ability to understand our sense of purpose, our sense of worth, our sense of value and self-esteem. And there are so many situations where, because we haven't paid attention to those things, it's not about aligning yourself to a particular religion or anything like that. It's just that the core of who I am as a human being, and finding something to anchor that into where I know that I'm enough, that I have worth, that I have value, that when I'm in a conversation with another human being, I don't need to feel like I'm less than them. All of that, I think, is how I understand what spiritual means in this sense. And if you think of the mess that we see in the world, where when you don't know those things, or you're not sure of those things, you end up in quite a competitive dynamic with other people. So you go on the defensive or the attack mode with others. So what I believe is better than what you believe, and I'm right and you're wrong, and you make enemies out of people and all the rest of it. Whereas if you're just, hey, this is me, and I'm learning to be the best me, and I've got this sense of purpose that I'm here to play a role in life. I think when people have a confidence in those things, actually there's a generosity that opens up in their life that makes them, I wanted to say weller, but that's not a word.
But it could be. We could name that.
There's a sense of wellness about who they are that's contagious for other people. So this thing about creating this like spokes of a wheel, and at the end of the spokes I would put those 5 things of economic and physical and social and financial and spiritual, and then at the end of those spokes would be the score out of 10. Further into you go, that would be like a 1, and then every so often I do like so how am I doing? Where would I place myself on the economic? Where would I place myself on the social? And then it's like a health check. And I remember doing it one time and realising that there was a massive problem in on my chart when I looked at it, and I suddenly realised that everything was going really well except the emotional, because the busyness of my life had created this lack of time to be in relationship with people, and the crazy schedule meant that I was never around home and all of those things. And then, of course, you realise, when the crisis comes, who do you call on?
Yeah.
Because you've
Yeah.
not had. So I find it a really helpful exercise.
I think that's really. I mean, I've done that. We've done that kind of exercise together, and I found that really helpful. It literally maps how you're doing, doesn't it? You literally draw a kind of map of the different those 5 different areas, and then you can kind of. Of course, it's subjective, but it's also enormously helpful. And I think your example of the emotional thing, being like not giving enough time to your friends, it just highlights that actually we need the other, or we need one another to actually help us in our well-being.
Yeah.
It's actually those relational connections that make us who we are.
Yeah. I mean, and that again is a divine thing, isn't it? That we are all image bearers. We're all made in the image. So we are created with an interdependence with one another, just as when a baby is born, it needs its mum. It can't survive without its mum. I genuinely believe that's how, so to live in isolation, to be in an age where individualism is king, is the opposite of wellness.
Absolutely.
And that again is that big thing about capitalism, isn't it? It's like be the best individual, the most successful.
Well, it's like make you the star of the show, isn't it? It's what drives Instagram. It's like the show with real kind of life, isn't
selfie,
it?
Whereas actually we are utterly dependent on our wellness with other people.
Yeah. It's about being weller.
It's about being weller. We've created a new word. So I was talking the other day about how in Maori culture, the way that young people and communities are taught about well-being is these dimensions that we've talked about are presented to them as the supporting walls of a house. And it's not just a house that belongs to an individual, it's the community house. So there's this sense of these things are utterly vital for the individual, but they are absolutely vital for the community to function healthily and well. Yeah. And again, that's like a divine, is how we're called to be. Isn't it?
Absolutely. And there's I'm thinking about your kind of spirituality, kind of what you've been talking about there, and it strikes me that there's so I'm a person of faith, and from a kind of Christian perspective, there's an author called David Augsburg who talks about tripolar spirituality, and I think,
tripolar,
which I think is really quite helpful for maybe in this discussion, because he says it's about love of God, love of the other, and then love of creation, and it's that kind of balance between all 3 of those, that when they come together, there's a sense of kind of connection, a sense of well-being, because you're connecting to those around you and also to creation, and there is that sense of purpose.
What do you do with that? Because I've heard this before, where kind of amongst some people I've heard it amongst people from kind of Christian faith, where it's deemed as selfish to do things about yourself. Like it's deemed as, you can't really spend time on doing that kind of enjoyable thing because you need to be giving your life wholeheartedly to changing the world for everyone else.
Well, I suppose we should be giving our lives
I think it's to do the Protestant work.
I think it probably is, and also the sense that, but if we do that, you and I know, because of busyness, you can't do that for long, because you just burn out, you only need to look across, ministers or youth ministers and see the amount of kind of burnout that happens when we don't take time to take a step back. And I think it goes back to your oxygen principle. So we need that. We need those moments of quiet. We need that kind of Sabbath. We need that rest. We need that sense of space, I think, because otherwise you can do all that great stuff, but you won't do it for very long, I don't think.
And Sabbath is that principle of, it's based on to do with the Moses story, isn't it? And do you want to talk a bit about that?
Well, I suppose it comes really through, the creation narrative in Genesis, where kind of God creates the world, and there are many different ways of understanding that, and I'm not saying it's periods of time or it's not literal, it's that creation narrative is about God creating the world out of love, actually, and even Yahweh rests. So Sabbath is built into that notion of rest, is built into the very fabric of creation. It weaves its way through the narrative. And you've got those other moments in the Old Testament where there are pauses, like the year of Jubilee, where everything gets redistributed. And that sense that actually what we've kind of lost is those moments to pause and to reflect and to think, okay, this is going well, this isn't going well. It comes back to your kind of spokes. How do we address the when there's unbalance in our lives? How self-aware are we that we are in that moment, that we aren't doing enough physical exercise, or emotionally we're not connected to our friends? How do we pause? And that, so even in the creation narratives, there is that moment of Sabbath that comes around once every 7 days. What a wonderful pattern to have, just to pause and go, well, I'm not going to look at my emails today. I'm going to pause, and I'm going to take time, and I'm going to spend time with those who are friends, those who I love, So as I said, I'm a person of faith connected to a church, and sometimes I really appreciate churches are not good places for people, but sometimes they and hopefully they can be. And the connections you get within a community are incredibly important, I think, for our well-being.
In the Moses story and the with Pharaoh having to make bricks. Lots of bricks. And it's every day. And the freedom comes to them, but there's a bit of a desire in them to keep making the bricks. And so you get this whole sense of actually what they're being called out of is this enslavement to always just keep producing. So again, going back to what you said at the beginning, there's this sense of you have to bring pause in. And maybe a massive thing that we need to think about is understanding that when you introduce a pause into your pattern, so maybe you say on Saturday, I'm not going to look at Facebook, or I'm not going to do Instagram, or I'm definitely going to go for a swim or a run or a whatever, that when you do those things, it does mean that other things aren't going to get done. But we live with what that is. And it may be that means we aren't top of the tree, and it may mean, but that maybe that is an indicator of us being part of a different way of being, a different system, a different way of doing life. And it maybe makes us more human. And less like a machine.
I think so. But I think there's choice there. And I think when I look back, but I think some of that kind of wisdom comes with time and with age, because I know...
You saying I'm old?
No. No. But I'm just like, I look and I see some of my friends' children get jobs in the city, and that's great. But they are working really long hours. Now they're rewarded, well financially for it, but at what cost? Like, where's the pause? Where's the kind of moments, to rest?
And how much of their humanness is lost for them? Because at some point the money isn't enough. And you will replace what isn't enough with something else that may not be good for you or whatever. So fascinating. Thank you, David. It's really good. I feel like there's a whole load in there that we've talked about.